Welcome into Real Talk Today. I'm Michael Liptak here with Sydney McIntyre. We sat down with two advocates from the Pueblo Rape Crisis Services, Kira Svirsky and Nikki Sosa. We sat down with them to talk about sexual awareness. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and we sat down with them to discuss some of the things that evolve around sexual assault. And here is our conversation with them. Now, what are some of the biggest concerns that victims have when they do try to come out to someone?
So that really is very interesting. A study was done a while back on what are some of the primary concerns in coming out and telling their story. And I believe one of the primary concerns was their family finding out that it really is kind of still has the stigma that there's so much shame surrounding survivors, that there's shame put on them by society, by friends, by family, and even by themselves especially. So that is one of the primary concerns, is just even having their loved ones know that they've been sexually assaulted.
I think too, something that shouldn't be overlooked is possibly the fear of that perpetrator, the fear that this person that has committed this crime onto them will find out and there will be some sort of ramifications. And lastly, not being validated, I think, is huge. I think underreporting is such a big issue with this crime type because victims are afraid that they simply won't be believed.
Now, you mentioned part of your responsibility as the outreach manager is trying to raise the awareness of consent. Talk about a little bit about that. I think sometimes it gets misconstrued by people, like the definition is different for many others. Kind of talk about what your role is trying to do with that and just what consent is.
Sure. So consent is an agreement to an activity, either verbally or through action. And part of that is knowing exactly what that activity is going to entail. And so in consent, both parties must be fully conscious and kind of clearly able to communicate the fact that they are consenting, which is always 100% voluntary.
What are some of the misconstructions that some of these weird ideas people think consent is? What are some of the more common ones that you hear through your work?
I think a lot of times we educate that saying yes to one thing is not saying yes to everything. So if an initial yes to one thing, it needs to be an ongoing, continuous yes, either again verbally or through actions. Definitely, I think that's one of the big ones. There's a lot of gray area in there with that.
I agree with that.
Do you have any others?
I think too, there's kind of this campaign that's been shifting from no means no to yes means yes. So again, it doesn't have to be verbal, it can be through actions too, through those kind of social cues, but just saying no is not enough anymore. That person actually needs to be saying yes.
Now, what are some of the myths about sexual assault in general? There's different myths for men and women. We'll start with the women. What are some of the myths that people think about when it comes to sexual assault?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest ones for women is that women falsely accuse men of rape or cry rape. That's a very popular one. And the fact of the matter is that according to the FBI, the rate of false reporting with this crime type is about 2%, which is pretty consistent with other major crime types. And again, that's one of the ones that we try so hard to overcome as an agency, because we do believe it's one of the reasons that women don't often report, that they will be kind of pegged as falsely accusing or crying rape.
In addition, is that one that women are asking for by what they're wearing, the way they're behaving, things like that. So that's definitely a big one that we still do see with our clients.
Now, from the men's side of thing, I think there's always that thing that men like it and they encourage it. We're seen more as the sexual person in a relationship. What are some of the myths about that, as I just kind of mentioned, with men?
Absolutely. So because men are viewed as these kind of sexual creatures much more so than women, there's this misconception that men cannot be raped, that no matter what the sexual encounter is, it's something that they enjoy and it's never something that's forceful. That's absolutely not true. Men don't evade this crime type. They're perpetrated on mostly by males, but sometimes by women. And in the United States as a whole, it's about 1 in 59 men that will experience rape at some point in their lifetime.
Now, going towards looking at men, and what are the differences when you're dealing with a male victim versus a woman victim?
So we do treat them typically the same, that offering them that validation, support, all the resources, information that they might need, but taking into some considerations, like they may be questioning their sexual orientation, have a lot of confusion kind of surrounding that. So things like that we do kind of take special consideration when working with them.
Now, do men, are they a little bit more closed off compared to some of the women victims?
You know, that's a really good question, and I have to say from my personal experience, I haven't seen a huge difference. In terms of the actual psychology and the psychosocial impacts, I'm not perfectly sure, but in my personal experience, I've just kind of had the same interactions with both males and females.
It's a lot of the same kind of conversations where there is that self-blame and there's shame in conversations I've had of just a lot of embarrassment and needing that validation and support that they are believed and that it wasn't their fault.
And now, of course, with victims too, how we're talking about both the men and the women, do you by chance see a pattern of age that come in, or is it misconstrued that there's a lot more younger individuals that come in, or is it adults as well?
I'll let you know that last year we had 159 primary victims, so those were the individuals that were affected straight on directly. And of those, 58 were 14 and under. So it's quite a big chunk. It's a good majority, I would say.
In your eyes I can't deny. Then there's me inside a sinking boat, running out of time. Without you I'll never make it out alive. But I know, yes I know we'll be alright. There's a devil in your smile that's chasing me, and every time I turn around